David Wylie from the OZ joining me as usual. You can find them at OkanaganZ.com/OZ. Get them on Twitter at OkanaganZ and at Wylie Writer. David, welcome back to the show. How are you during this bizarre time of self-isolation?
Hello. As always, good to talk to you. I'm pretty decent. Everyone in my household at the moment seems healthy, and yet we are actually isolating, spending some time inside, and getting real good at Fortnite.
Awesome. The one thing I spoke to former Edmonton Oiler Rob Schremp yesterday on my other podcast, Sports and More, and he said, this is giving us family time that we wouldn't have had before. So I guess to find a silver lining is important during this time. And one of the things we're trying to do is we're trying to brighten somebody's day. We're giving away a PAX Era, courtesy of Plant Life. Really excited about that. And we're doing it through our cannabis question of, do you name your accessories? Because I name everything. Like pretty much every cannabis accessory I own has a name. So do you name any of your accessories, or will you start if you don't?
I don't give them any specific names. I have a Crafty and a Mighty, and that's generally what I call them. I don't think that I could actually improve on those names. So now that you mention it, maybe I'll give them some alliterative names in the future, like Mighty Mike and
there you go.
Crafty Cam.
I like it. Alliteration is fun no matter what you are doing. It's one of my favorite things. One of our listeners said he names his bong LeBong James. So we're getting some interesting things. Bong Marley was one that it was a bong with several different whips on it, and they look like dread. So I like the Bong Marley one as well. So keep those for the listeners and viewers. Keep those coming in, and you could be eligible for the great prize pack courtesy of Plant Life. All right, David, let's chat a little bit about a few of the stories, and let's start with the cannabis industry making it well known that we want to be part of this support package for businesses in our country. We don't want any special treatment, but we just want equality when it comes to support from the federal government.
A whole bunch of cannabis companies have signed this letter that you mentioned. It's signed and headed over to two high-profile ministers. You got the Minister of Finance, Mr. William Morneau, and the Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry, Mr. Navdeep Bains. They're going to be on, or have been on, the receiving end of this letter. And the argument here is that the cannabis industry faces what's being called economic stigmatization. And basically, we're all calling on the federal government for immediate aid in the midst of this pandemic. Other businesses have gotten it. This isn't a request for special treatment, like you said. This is just, we're asking for help for an industry that basically added a cumulative total of $8 billion to the Canadian GDP over the course of the last year. And these stimulus measures would help and support an industry that's facing tough times, like every other industry right now. We have challenges with employees. We have challenges with keeping a business going, and at the same time, making sure that we're respecting that there is a sickness going on, that we're trying to protect families and workers. And this is a place where the government, we're reliant right now on our government to make sure that our economy can continue to move forward, and that once this is done, once we've moved on with our lives, the people have jobs to go back to. And our cannabis industry has been weathering, as this letter notes, a lot of shocks in the past 6 months. We've seen challenges, including the loss of over 2,000 well-paying jobs in the sector. And we need to make sure that these companies have access to capital and access to credit to make sure that we can weather the storm.
It's so important, and I'm proud to have my signature as part of the more than 70 different people from around the cannabis industry that also put their names on that letter. Big thanks to John Carl from the Alberta Cannabis Council for giving me a heads up because I want that support. And you're right. It's just equal treatment. And, here's why one of the big reasons why I think that the cannabis industry should be involved in that, other than the 8 billion reasons that you had mentioned. But in a lot of places, cannabis is being considered essential and one of the essential needs for people to stay open. So if it's being deemed essential in a lot of places, shouldn't it be included in the stimulus package? Like that just, if it's essential in a lot of places, that means it's important to the community.
It does, and this means equal and fair access to funding through federal agencies like EDC or BDC. The BDC basically said that cannabis industries don't qualify for any help at this point in time, which I find to just be insane. This is a legal industry, and it serves not only recreational customers, but we're talking about medical patients. We're talking about people who need cannabis in order to ease their pain, to increase their appetite. I mean, we've said it again and again, but it's really important for people to understand. Think about cancer patients, for example. Cancer patients are very much helped by the medical cannabis. It helps them to lead at least a somewhat normal life, to eat properly, to get the rest that they need, and to even deal with some of the anxieties that come with this kind of an illness. And we want to make sure that the companies who are providing that help to them can continue on.
You're right. Cannabis patients rely on the plant, whether it's appetite stimulation, whether it's to help with nausea. It's the effects of chemotherapy is a lot of what, from the cancer patients. And, my wife is one twice. My mother was had cancer. So I know what chemotherapy can do to the body, and cannabis can really help with a lot of that. So there's a lot of people that might, if you get rid of the cannabis industry, will have to go to the black market, which we all know is dangerous. Now, the good thing, David, for a lot of those people that I just talked about is that a lot of cannabis stores are staying open. We chatted last week about some of them deciding to close. The ones that are opening or that are staying open right now, first of all, they're taking a lot of precautions, but they're seeing a real buzz in sales.
They are. There's a large amount of sales that are happening. BDS Analytics, which specializes in cannabis market and trends reports, they recently held a webinar to present some of the data that they've collected from retail stores throughout Canada and the U.S. And there were some really interesting trends that they noted. One of them is that flower is just flying off the shelves. People are stocking up on good old-fashioned bud. They are choosing strains generally that are really high in CBD, and that's not something that we saw initially in legalization. The high THC strains were the big sellers, and now it seems like people seem to be turning to the high CBD strains to deal with some of the anxieties that they're facing in these troubled times. And cannabis retailers across North America are saying that they're determined to keep their doors open. They say we're here to stay, basically, and to the best of their ability, they're going to keep the doors open. That means in some cases, I've heard of some chains putting up barriers, almost like you're starting to see in grocery stores, to keep their frontline employees protected. There's a lot of extra sanitization that's happening. Now, the BDS has noted that the supply chain is strong, so there's not a shortage in product as far as cannabis is concerned. But one of the stressors that they're facing is that they can't get enough cleaning products, or in some cases, one of the retailers noted that they couldn't get enough coffee. So I'm sure that we can all absolutely understand that need. Basically, going forward, there's a lot of optimism based on the fact that Ontario, for example, has designated cannabis retail and production to be essential. That's following the lead of other jurisdictions that include San Francisco and Los Angeles. So that's going to be really important going forward, and it sets the tone as the municipalities across the country really are grappling with those similar questions. And BDS and a lot of us, of course, are hoping that municipalities, provinces, all the different jurisdictions are going to see the need to make these essential businesses. As far as other things, I mean, some of the retailers have characterized this time as being as busy or busier than 420. And they're starting to experience staffing shortages as this pandemic unfolds. Some employees may just have a fear of being out and trying to take care of the safety of their families. Some employees are falling ill, whether it's COVID or whether it's flu or cold, whatever it is. The precaution is to stay home if you're feeling sick. But so far, retailers are saying that they've been able to cover those gaps by assigning more hours to the remaining staff. Though BDS is noting that if staffing does start to become tighter, that could become a constraint with stores. I have heard of a few that have closed because employees gotten sick and they just don't have the staffing there to keep on going.
Yeah, that is the case in some stores in this area, and yeah, those are the only two things that I think will prevent stores from staying open. Is, if they don't have enough staff, and then the other thing on the production side is, a lot of the tubs and different things, the packaging comes from China, so. We have to be a little bit worried about that, depending on how long this goes. I don't think there's an immediate concern, but depending on how long this takes to run its course and what is going on in China, that's kind of the only reason that you would see any of the stores close. And I've been in a couple of them to pick up a couple of things lately, and they're taking extraordinary precautions. Fire and Flower has gone to pick up the fast lane basically only, so you order online, you get there, you pay, hopefully with tap, no cash. I've even heard of some stores like closing up the magnetic strip area, so it's only tap that you can use. So they are taking extraordinary precautions to keep the customers and particularly the staff safe, because you just don't know who is walking through that door and where they've been right now.
Mm-hmm. We're starting to see other trends develop too. Ordering ahead is starting to become quite popular. A lot of retailers would really like the option to have delivery.
Yes.
That'll keep people in their homes. And I think that that's something that that would be great to see a quick acting federal law to allow that across the country, especially as more jurisdictions deem this to be essential. There were some interesting notes, too, about just consumer habits. And BDS is saying that generally people consume in the evening, but being locked down inside all day, we're starting to see a little bit more consumption through the day. People are spending a lot more time alone in their homes, and that does create a bit of an uptick in cannabis consumption. And overall, people are feeling anxious about the future. They're alone. They can't go to the gym or do other things that they might do to relax. So we are seeing an increase in consumption and a demand for more product. So what you're seeing at the store level is, people are buying more flower and they are buying it in larger formats too.
Well, and this is why I think delivery makes sense right now. One of the fastest growing demographics in the cannabis industry is seniors. Like you talk to a lot of people at different companies, and seniors are starting to really get into cannabis for whatever reason. Who are the most impacted and for we fear the most for right now with COVID-19 is the senior population. So they're definitely not going to want to go out to get their cannabis. So that's why I think delivery makes such sense right now for that demographic of the cannabis consumer.
Absolutely, I 100% agree with that.
So hopefully that happens, like you said, across the country. And while the cannabis industry, as we mentioned, especially some retail stores, creating a lot of sales right now, they're also giving back to frontline workers. The medical staff are facing the worst of this virus on a daily basis. And the cannabis industry has a lot of safety gear, you might call it, and they're giving it to frontline workers right now, a few different companies, aren't they?
And we're so happy to see that. That kind of generosity is really needed right now. a lot of us in our everyday lives, we've seen runs on things that we need every day. Toilet paper went real fast for some reason or other. Hand sanitizer, canned goods. In my neck of the woods, one couple even went so far as to buy out the entire meat section at a local grocery store, leaving none for others. So that kind of selfishness and hoarding right now is unfortunately a fact of life. And from my point of view, the run on face masks has been one of the most distressing developments that I've seen. It's leaving our frontline healthcare workers, those people who are treating your grandma, your grandpa, young people who are in ICU because of COVID. They're lacking protection because there's just, unfortunately, there's not enough personal protective gear to go around. So, enter the heroes that the cannabis industry really needs right now. And drawing from their own supply, we've seen several major cannabis producers, including Canopy Growth and Hexo. They're providing hospitals with personal protective equipment, including face masks, gloves, and bodysuits from whatever they have in their surplus supply. So basically, this is the same kind of equipment that these licensed producers need to don when they're going into growing rooms to ensure a sterile environment and prevent contamination. And at the moment, some of them have a little bit of extra at a point where we're actually seeing some hospitals, if you can believe it, reusing protective gear because they just don't have it. That's not an ideal situation. We talked a little while ago about Canopy Growth closing its two massive greenhouses in BC, and perhaps a silver lining to that shutdown is that the companies noted that they've been able to donate thousands of gloves and tie suits and masks from those facilities to the frontline healthcare workers who need it. Hexo says it's donated about 150 N95 face masks to paramedic services in Quebec. And BNN Bloomberg says that in its reporting, it's heard from other cannabis producers that are in the process of donating these supplies too. Unfortunately, it's not across the board. Cannabis companies do also need this gear, and like we talked about a little bit earlier, these are essential services. So some companies like Aurora, Organigram, Tilray, they just don't have the stock to donate. But we're seeing other businesses, other companies now too, that are starting to mass produce masks and protective equipment. Bauer, for example, is getting into the game, and they're starting to create some PPE. And other companies too, like Tesla and Apple, are manufacturing and donating some equipment that they have surplus on.
Well, and that's the great thing that you can find during. I mean, you can go on and see the people on the beach that are ignoring this or having coronavirus parties and just being ridiculous people, or the people that think this is a made up event. So you can find all that if you want. But you can also find the stories of people giving back, and the Broadway seamstresses that are out of work right now that are saying we'll sew whatever equipment, we'll do this, and the companies that have 3D printers pitching in, and the cannabis industry is no different. We all want to be friendly in the cannabis industry in general, and I'm not surprised that certain companies have pitched in to try to help out, and that, like I said, is the one thing that you can find during this that at least maybe can put a smile on your face or make you be proud that you're in this industry.
Absolutely. And to circle back to what we first talked about, these businesses are essential, and these businesses do deserve and do need federal aid in order to continue to do the good work that they're doing.
Well said, David. Thanks as always for joining me. I look forward to hearing more names of your accessories in the future. And first and foremost, stay well and stay healthy to you and your family. Thanks as always, David.
Thank you.